Hi, everyone. I am here to introduce you to another guest, another person who loves teens and is wanting teens to know more about themselves and more about how to regulate their emotions, and anxiety is one of those. So I have Emer O'Donnell with us, and she lives in the UK, which is kind of exciting because we don't always have people that are not living in the United States. But I want you to know all the people in the world that you can go to, and parents, people that you can look into, and all the resources and support that you have. But Emer has over 20 years of experience in psychology, working in global organizations, and as a qualified behavioral change coach. She recognized a gap in young people's education and has gone on to create a program to proactively give them the tools to learn how to live a life that they love, because too many young people are lost to suicide, which it doesn't need to be this way. She works with individuals and organizations that focus on young people. And so I'm going to let her tell more about herself. But I love just in that bio, Emer, that you said that, there's a gap with education with young people. And I am totally agreeing with that. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll get into a conversation about all these things.
Sure, love to do that. And I just want to say I saw your episode 184 because I
Mm,
know you number them with Scott Symington's book in terms of the two screen method, and
hmm
it's really clever. So I would say to anyone who's listening to this now, go back and listen to that one because I
Oh,
thought it
good.
was really, really good.
Do you
Um,
know him or know his work?
no, I didn't. I'd never heard of him before, so that's why I was fascinated to
Yeah.
hear about it. I'm so glad that you featured him. So that was really
Yeah.
good. Yeah, really, really good. So a little bit about me. Well, I think you've said quite a lot about me, but thank you very much for that. So I really feel that each and every, young person out there is unique and they need to be celebrated. And during those adolescent years, they don't always celebrate or value themselves. And we live in a world that's very noisy now. A lot of young people
Mm.
are feeling overwhelmed. They struggle to make decisions because I don't think they get enough sleep. I think they get enough rest. I think they're bombarded by data. We get more in a day now than a person got in their whole lifetime in the 1900s. And so for me, we need to give them new tools. And as you said, the education system unfortunately hasn't caught up with that. And we're
hmm
having a tsunami of, mental health issues in terms of depression, anxiety, self-harm with young people. And if we don't change our behavior, we get the same result. So
hmm
we have to do something different.
Yes. Well, one of the things that you had written to me was that parents needed to update their skills, probably update their parenting skills. So, what are some of the ones that you're remembering or thinking about, and how parents need to update those?
Okay, so I think it's really important to highlight that parents are spending more time with their children than even moms were doing in the 50s. I mean, moms might have been at home in the 50s, but their kids were outside running around. They had
hmm
freedom to be out. And so, what that has caused, I think, with a lot of parents is that they have to do more. They have to organize summer holidays. Nobody organized my summer holidays. They
hmm
have to, and then because they're around their teens or just, their children full stop, we can't help it but give feedback.
hmm
Even if they're doing something their way, we want to correct them to do it our way. And feedback is the second greatest human need after breathing.
Oh
We
my
do
gosh.
it every 3 hours or more. And the problem is most of us are not very good at it.
Mm,
So I would say the first thing I would say, the skill you need to update as a parent is you need to understand how feedback works. You need to understand when you give it, are you lifting someone up? Are you ultimately dragging them down? And you need
mm,
to understand just basically how it lands because it's a skill. And as you would know as a coach, it's a skill. It's
hmm
something we learn. I think the other thing that's really important as a parent in terms of updating skills is active listening.
mm,
Again, it's something we do as a coach, you know, and it's giving time because parents are so busy and they're stressed and we've got
hmm
smartphones. Never mind the kids being addicted to them. We're addicted to them. And
Hmm.
so multitasking, our brains aren't they're not very good at it. And if we can't give the time to our kids when they really need it, and I call it being the good adult that your child needs, someone that
Hmm.
you can go to them, they feel that they're not going to be judged, then you're not going to lose your temper, you're not going to be stressed. I mean, I think managing emotions is as much something that parents need to do now as
Hmm.
their teens need to do, because we live in a stressful world, and we're not programmed for it. And so we need to have new tools and techniques to manage it for ourselves so that we can regulate ourselves so that we can show up as a better good adult for our teens.
Hmm. Well, and that's what I've said to parents before that, they can get once they hear this, oh, you need to have all these skills and do this stuff, and then they start feeling bad, like, oh no, I'm a bad parent, I don't have these skills. But no one had these skills. No one was taught this. Like you said, we're coaches, so we were taught it through a coaching training. I was taught some of it through school counseling training a little bit, but I actually learned more when I went through my life coaching training than I did my school counseling training. But the only reason that some people know this a little bit more than others is because we went through a training, but we did not get it from our parents. It is not just an organic thing that happens to you, that you do have to be trained in it, and you do have to be able to regulate, which again we're not taught how to do. And even though I understand all this, I sometimes can feel like reverting back to things that I used to say or do before, like, oh, that's hurting grandma's feelings or whatever. Then I'm like, no, my grandchild can't hurt my feelings. Like, my feelings are my feelings and his feelings are his, like, and I have to keep reminding myself I can't say the same things that I used to say because I know better. And
Mm.
I know that he needs to feel all of his emotions and it has nothing to do with me. And yeah, that's like part of that relearning parenting.
And I think, you and I can take a lot of this stuff for granted because we have been trained.
Hmm.
And even still, we can still have our emotions triggered sometimes.
Right.
None of us are perfect. But for
Hmm.
me, it's understanding how emotions work, understanding how stress and anxiety works,
Hmm.
understanding what well-being is, having tools and techniques, knowing what your triggers are, and making sure that the teenage journey isn't about you. I use this because I say when they're babies, they put up with a lot from us because we mainly don't have a clue what we're doing, especially if they're number one. When
Hmm.
they get to be teenagers, it's time for payback.
Mm.
We have to forgive them because their brains are going through a massive maturation process. You need to know about that. You need to know how it shows up. You need to know, yeah, you just need to know that we all make up stories, and we have biases and we have thinking errors, and there's over 200 of them. And if
Hmm.
you don't have some awareness around that, then actually you'll end up with the same pattern of thinking. You'll end up with the same story. And it's about knowing whether that story serves you and your child or not, because we
Hmm.
have an opportunity to change the story. But we firstly also need to know how to calm everything down.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I've taken, in terms of me, what do I bring to the party? It's the background in psychology, it's my coaching stuff, and it's also being a mum of three and knowing that when you combine all of that and seeing when I coach young people and seeing their parents really struggle, I'm thinking there must be something that I can give them that enables me to make a connection quickly with their child
Hmm.
that they could do much better at home, because
Hmm.
they're not failing. They're just human. But there's
Hmm.
there's more learning required now, and I think it's harder to raise a teen now than ever before.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, and I think, somebody might be listening to this like, oh my gosh, I don't have any of these skills. But the good news is they can be taught, they can be learned. And no, none of us are going to get through parenting without, losing our cool at some point or saying something we wished we didn't say or doing something we wish we didn't do. But I think the biggest part of that is being able to repair and to be open to repair and allowing, to talk about things. And when your child brings up some things that have been hurtful, to listen and hear that and be able to, what do you need from me? How can I help repair this is like probably the biggest thing that they can do. So, even if and when these mistakes happen, that's not the end of it, or that's not like, oh, forget it, this isn't going to work, but that there's other things that you can do then to repair that. And it just makes the relationship stronger.
Well, families are the first system we're part of that are diverse.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of think, oh, we're all part from the same family. No, every single person within that family is different. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's bound to be clashes.
Sure.
There's a lot of emotions flying around. You see me at my worst, you see me at my best. So I think one of the most important things we can do is when we don't show up as our best selves, and we've got to remember we're the adults in the room,
Mm-hmm.
is knowing how to apologize
Yeah.
and say you're sorry, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what you would want somebody to do to you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when we can learn to stand in someone else's shoes, not in judgment, but in curiosity, why have you behaved like that? Tell
Mm-hmm.
me what's going on for you. You're acting out so much. So what is it that's going on? What is it that you need from me? What is the attention that you
Mm-hmm.
need? Because the more they act out, the more they actually need you to love and support them, even though it could drive you crazy. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's again not judgment, not frustration. They are a work in progress, as
Mm-hmm.
are we.
Yes. Yeah.
We're
Everyone.
still figuring it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you just put a different lens on it, that it's not that they don't care about you or they did something or they didn't do something. If there's one thing I've learned from young people, when they screw up, they beat themselves up equally as much as you will do.
Mm-hmm.
But they need you to be the good adult that they can come and talk to and say, okay, you've done this. You might say, oh my goodness, I can't believe you did that. What you need to say
Mm-hmm.
is, okay, we've done this. It's happened. What would you do next time?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a really powerful thing you can do as a parent is to run them through scenarios, run them through stories. So if you end up at a party and lots of people are drinking and you're the last person there and you have no way of going home, will you get into the car with somebody? What would you do in that instance so that they don't end up like a rabbit in the headlights when something like that may happen? The most important thing I think you can be for your teenager in today's world is their 3 a.m. call,
Mm-hmm.
where they're never fearful to call you because they often can't connect the dots. So, an example, kid drinks too much, passes out. A lot of teens will be thinking, oh, we better not ring anyone because, oh my goodness, if we get found out, we're going to be in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they should be thinking, we need to get the ambulance here as quickly as possible because we don't
Mm-hmm.
want anything bad to happen to this person. So
Right.
knowing that they can ring you is so important. But if you're a parent that every time they screw up, you shout and scream at them, you are never going to be their 3 a.m. call. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, you just have to get them to survive through the
Mm-hmm.
years because
Right.
they will come out the other side.
Mm-hmm. I
You
think
know,
I find that from parents the most, I think, is that I think a lot of these yelling matches and this really, I think it's fear and anxiety, but it's coming out as anger, is that they're so worried that if I don't do this job correctly, my child's going to be homeless. They're going to be, they're never going to have a job. They're never going to have good relationships. And I would say that that is so, I mean, that might be 1% of people that would happen to. The parents that are trying so hard and then getting so frustrated because they want things to be a certain way and they're not. I just don't think any of those kids will ever turn out terrible. They're going to have mistakes. They might fail something. They might not get to school on time sometimes, whatever. But in the end, they're going to turn out fine. And I've seen it over and over again after 31 years in the school system, working with kids and teens and having those parents come in that were in a panic. Oh my gosh, they're failing things. What am I going to do? And it doesn't feel good to have your child failing classes, especially if your best friend's child has all A's or whatever. But at the same time, I would be able to calm them and say, as an adult, they're going to be fine. Let's try to figure out what is getting in the way. What's the barrier of them not passing this class? And many times it's, the child didn't have some skill or have some way of, they didn't know how to problem solve it, or they didn't know, what the next step was. And because they were getting in trouble all the time, they didn't want to ask their parent, what do I do next? Because they knew
Mhm.
they were going to get in trouble. So, yeah, I think it being that person that your child can problem solve with, like, well, I thought about this, but I also thought about this, and just letting them, even if it's they come up with a solution that you don't really like if they said something like, well, I've thought about not going to school. And of course, parents don't want to hear that. Saying, okay, well, what would if you let's take that answer. You're not going to go to school. Okay, well, what will happen next if you don't go to school? And what will happen next? And let's look at all the steps. And then whatever that end result is, they probably don't want. And okay, well, then what else could you do besides not go to school? What else could happen? And so I used to do that with kids all the time. They would say, "Well, I'm going to quit school." I'd be like, "Okay. Well, if you quit school, what are the things that could happen?" Because I was just like this neutral, calm, and it is easier to do when they're not your child, but you can, if you go have coffee with your friend later and tell her how terrible it was and how much it was scary or whatever. I mean, you can talk about it, just not with your kid.
And I think that's why triggers, knowing your triggers are so important, to becoming aware of those, they're so important. It's interesting that in the US, they did some research that said that 97% of the things we fear will happen to us won't. And of those things that do happen to us, we actually manage them much better than we
Hmm.
think. So you can
Yes.
just think how much energy is spent on fearing and running
Hmm.
away from stuff that we don't want, rather than creating and going towards stuff that we do want to create.
Right.
For me, there's something that I wrote, and it's a saying that my 4-year-old son said to me when I was pulling into a driveway where I was living at the time. He said, "It's all about love, Mum. You just have to fill your heart with love."
Oh.
And I never forget that,
Hmm.
because actually that's what parenting is. It's not always about being their best friend and letting them away with everything. They
Hmm.
need you to give them boundaries. But the
Hmm.
more neutral you can be, the more open you can be. And the more you can think about the person that you would have been happy to go and talk to when you were a teen.
Hmm.
What was it about them that you felt you could talk to them? You need to become that person.
Yeah. Now, do you have trainings for parents, or do you mostly train kids, or how does your work work?
How does my work work? So actually, I wrote a book for parents because I could see I work with young people and I train trainers, other
Mhm.
coaches. But I wrote a book for parents called Understanding Teen Stress and Anxiety: A Parent's Guide to Building Love and Connection.
Mm.
Because I would see that they would bring me their children, and sometimes they would always think it was the child's fault. And of
Mhm.
course, in every relationship, there's two, takes two
Mm.
to tango.
Right.
And I just thought, I can seem to connect with these children easily. And of course, I'm independent, but equally, I've been trained to do it.
Mhm.
So, what is it that I do that I could give to them so they
Mm.
can understand and they can do some of the stuff that I do, and have some of the understanding that's kind of really easy for me to tap into? But actually, if you're not trained in it, I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't even begin to go into that world. But I think we live in a really difficult, psychological, challenging world now. And so I just thought, I'm going to create this book for parents so that it'll help them on their journey, and actually, and for professionals who work with young people, because I think they need these skills too.
Yes.
I do run a program. It's called the 7Q Teen Reconnect Formula, because I believe that so many young people feel overwhelmed in
Mhm.
terms of trying to make decisions. If you just think about it, once upon a time, there was one type of coffee. How
Mhm.
many are there now?
Right.
And that's just one decision.
Mhm.
So we have so many more decisions that have to be made. There's so much more noise in the world that we're in. And with social media, it doesn't help because they're doing this social comparison all the time.
Mhm.
So getting back to basics to understand who they are I think is really important because you need that foundation of inner knowing in order to
Mhm.
create a life that you would love. So
Yeah.
that's what my program does. It helps them understand who they are, helps them understand how they can build their confidence, what their strengths are, and where they will find their climate in which they can thrive. Because
Mm.
that is what successful people do. They know what their strengths are, they manage their gaps, and they find a climate in which they can thrive. And then
Mhm.
it's also about, because we're like an onion, there's more than one layer. We're not one dimensional. So there's also other things I look at, which are limiting beliefs where we pick up when we're small, that sabotages all the time,
Mhm.
knowing about mental resistance that, you know, we may want to go for a run every night, but we can't get ourselves off the sofa. That's mental resistance.
Mhm.
It's the fear and, how to overcome that and understanding values and just understanding how to calm everything down.
Mm.
We have access to 11,000 bits of information per second
Mm.
in our unconscious minds. But our conscious mind can only access 40 to 50. And because our mind loves the old tried and tested patterns, I
Mhm.
say if we're not careful, our minds are like an untrained puppy. We need to learn how to train them because otherwise they go all over the place.
Mhm.
And if we don't know how to almost reprogram, become aware of the thought processes that trigger our behaviors, that don't give us the results we want, if we don't become aware of how that works and how you can manage it, we'll roll out the same behavior and get the same results.
Mhm.
And the point is, there's so much information available to us, but if we can't turn around and see there's another door in which we will find more information, then we stay stuck. And it's
Mhm.
particularly so like that for young people because, their brain is only 80% mature.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's what I do. And I really, I love it. I love nothing better. And I'm sure you're exactly the same. Where a young person comes in and they just look like they just don't even know where to start. But I love it when the light bulbs are going off, and by the end of it, there's a spark in their eye because they know that they're okay. Because they
Yes. Mhm. I think that's one of the main things that I get excited about because I spent all of my teens and really, I'd almost say half of my then adult time thinking there was something wrong with me or I didn't fit in or, what's wrong with me or I don't know, all the things that and I think that that is a typical thing that a lot of people think about, like what's wrong with me. And if I just would have been able to talk to someone that could have showed me what was right with me, what I was doing that was good, what my strengths were. And that I do love that too. And because of the assessment that I give, the strengths is probably my favorite part because when I show a teen, these are your top 5 strengths and I read about them to them and we talk about how does that fit with you, how does it not? And so many times they'll say, "Well, I knew that about myself, but I didn't know it was a strength. Like I didn't know that was a thing that I could even use." And one girl, her strength is that she can walk into a room and automatically know kind of like problem solve it in the moment. Like, what a skill is that? Like, that's so amazing to me. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I will." She said, "I love to walk into chaos and know I could just see all the things that need to be done to make it not be chaotic." And but yet she gets in trouble because she's bossy. Well, she's bossy because she knows what needs to be done. And so she's just going into rooms at school saying, "Okay, here's what we need to do. You go over here, you do this," and maybe even telling the teacher, go sit down, or I don't know. But like she's in trouble because she has the strength that she can do that. And I'm like, well, let's talk about how we can capitalize on that. And
Mm.
maybe someday at school, there are certain situations where maybe you'll have to step back and you know what you know, but maybe not say it in a certain way or maybe not bring it up in certain situations. But knowing that that is a strength, and then how do you use that in your life? And she's thinking law enforcement, which totally makes sense because then there's a lot of chaos she can walk into and just tell everybody what to do.
Well, that just sounds like a natural leadership skill to me.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and being able to identify those is really powerful. There's one that of the cue that I've created is it lets you know what your career themes are.
Mm,
Because careers are just behavior, right?
right.
Different types of behavior. So certain engineers will have certain behavioral traits because they'll be quite attracted to that career.
Hmm.
And so you know, you can identify the leader, the creative, the organizational one, the structured one, the support one, the people one. You can identify those.
Hmm.
And you're right, because in school that's not encouraged, because if everyone
No.
shows up in the class and they're telling everyone else what to do, it's chaos.
Yeah.
But in the world of business or in the real world, way
Hmm.
ho, we want you because you're going to
Yes.
sort out our problems. So
Right.
in some ways, being at school for so long can mean that young people have to kind of suppress what is a
Yeah.
natural talent,
Yeah.
and then they forget that they have it.
Hmm.
And they get, because they got into trouble for it, they think, oh, I don't want to roll that out.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a beautiful example to share.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that one. And I can't wait to see what she does. I work with people as long as they want to work with me, so I don't know how long she'll stay, but I'll certainly be keeping track of her. I want to see if there's anything else. I know you talked about the good adult and teens finding out who they are, which is so important. I totally agree with that. And parents are learning to update their skills. Well, what would you oh, I know there's something you're offering my listeners. They're going to get some free resources from you. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I'll share the link with you so that you can
Mhm.
share it with your readers. So what I did when I wrote my book, I had a place in the kind of teenage brain. I wrote a certain amount about addiction and a certain amount about sleep, but I didn't have enough room to put everything that I wrote about it. And I thought, I don't want it to go to waste because,
Mhm.
I've written it now, so I may as well, give it out there into the world and hopefully that it will help somebody because if we get enough sleep, it's one of the most important things we need to do in life. And there's a reason
Mhm.
why we need to sleep because it rejuvenates our bodies and our brains and everything that functions. So I have two free essential guides. One is what is teenage addiction, and another is why teenage sleep is so important. So I will
Mm.
share the details with that. And yeah, they're just free downloads that you can get. And hopefully it'll help provide some understanding because obviously young people, their sleep patterns change. They when they're little, they're often up at the crack of dawn, and when they're older,
Mhm.
they don't want to go to bed. And there's
Right.
a good reason for that. It's because, the chemicals in their bodies have changed. And part of it, I believe, is to help them leave the nest.
Yes.
So they're not hanging around adults all the time. They can start to do things on their own. And then another reason is getting up, really early for teenagers, super hard. They're not
Mhm.
lazy. They're still half asleep.
Right.
So don't
Yes.
blame them for being lazy. Actually, they
Mhm.
did again they do a lot of great research in the US where, they reduced the time that kids would come to school, like making it later by about half an hour, and the number of car accidents massively dropped because
Mm.
actually they were more awake.
Yeah.
And if you go to somewhere like Finland, they only have about 5 hours school, and they don't start
Mm.
till 9:30 in the morning. And it's
See
one of the
that?
best school systems in the world.
I love that. And I love that people are trying to do school differently. And I'm always going to be pushing for schools to. I was really hoping when the pandemic happened, I was still working at that time. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the perfect time when we come back to school to do it differently because it was a break and
Mm.
then we can get started in the right direction. We went right back to what we were doing before.
Mm.
And I'm so sad about that. And there are certainly schools out there that are doing the things that they need to be doing. And I'm excited about that, but we don't have near enough of them working on this really holistic child. Like we're just really working mostly on performance. We talked about that a little bit, where it's just, what are your grades and what are the scores that our school is getting and how are we ranked in the top schools or whatever, instead of what is really good for kids. And so I love that there are people out there like us doing things with kids, trying to help them to learn these skills outside of school. I would love it if it was part of school and we can both do that. And hopefully, as parents listen to these different ideas too, parents can advocate for those things to be happening in their schools. And probably if enough parents said, I want social emotional learning in my school every day. I want my kids to understand how to regulate their emotions. I want the teachers to know how to regulate their emotions. Maybe there's even some opportunities for parents to learn that along in the school or after school. I don't know. But there could be some amazing things that go on. So I hope we're all out there advocating for that for all of our young people because they're so important.
Well, I think we have to, because
Mm-hmm.
I say that they're voting with their health.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when our children vote with their health because they're ill, it's the one time parents have to stop and take
Mm-hmm.
note and say, okay, something needs to change here.
Mm-hmm.
We have created an environment in which, unlike previous generations, they don't run around enough. They're
Mm-hmm.
not active enough. They're given devices that are highly addictive, that actually fill their brains up with stuff that they don't always have the cognitive capabilities to figure out truth from fiction. And
Mm-hmm.
it's even got worse now with AI. You can see
Oh,
stuff
yes.
and it's just, they're fake people that you're looking at and they look real. And
Mm-hmm.
so all that constant social comparison, if we don't believe that we have an 80% chance of achieving a goal and a 20% chance of failure, well, I'm not surprised they don't want to get out of bed in the morning
Mm-hmm.
because they see all these amazing other people in the world that seems to have these dream lives. I call it the Marilyn Monroe syndrome.
Mm.
Fabulous smile on the outside, everything's great, but actually I'm dying on the inside.
Yeah.
And if we can't empower our children to understand what the truth is and know what it is to be human, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really human, not some fake version of it,
Mm-hmm.
then actually we're going to continue to have them on mental health, anxiety, stress, depression,
Mm-hmm.
railroads. And so that's why they need new skills. And you're absolutely right. It should be embedded as part of the education system
Mm-hmm.
because we're not serving them. If we have systems in education that are about performance, our children think they're all about performance. And of course, that's not what they are. They're much greater than that. They're
Mm-hmm.
much more valuable than that. And we also know that there's, three key intelligences. IQ is about passing exams. Okay, it'll probably get you to the interview or it might get you into college. But the secret sauce of top performers is emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to read the runes and get things done.
Yep.
And if our children aren't out running around, gaining learning through experience, which is the best way that we can learn, and doing it in a gradual way, and then all of a sudden they get to an age and we go, okay, off you go into the world now. And
Mm-hmm.
we're surprised that they're anxious and they're stressed, then we shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
because we have to now fill in the gap of not being able to run around free, of not constantly being monitored. We have to give them the skills to be able to give them the scaffolding to fill in those gaps. And I think that's what we're both talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm glad you're in the world doing these things because there's so many people that need support and we need a lot of us out there doing that so we can reach all of those people. And I'm so glad that I got to meet you too. So that's even better. That's what I love about technology is that I get to meet way more people in the world than I ever would have before. But well, thank you for being our guest today and I am going to put all your information in the show notes so they can find you and get the free resources and check out your book and all the things. And I wish you much luck in your business as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight to talk to you, and I hope this won't be our last communication. So I'm really looking forward to, anything I can share with you to make the lives of children better on your side of the pond and vice versa.
Yes, I love that so much. Well, thank you.
Take care.